Israel expects the hostage release to begin soon as the truce in Gaza enters its fourth day. It's believed all 20 living captives will be released to the Red Cross. And this will be followed by the handover of 28 bodies. U.S. President Donald Trump has declared the war in Gaza over, while Israel has claimed victory in its war with Hamas. An agreement has yet to be reached on Gaza's post-war governance and the territory's reconstruction. These issues are expected to be discussed at the Peace Summit in Egypt today. Well, for a closer look at how the truce is holding up and what might happen next, let's now speak to Daniel Shapiro, Distinguished Fellow with the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative. He's also served as U.S. Ambassador to Israel from 2011 to 2017. Mr. Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us. You know, a lot up in the air at the moment. What do you make of this first phase of the ceasefire? Can we expect the hostage prisoner swap to really proceed smoothly?
Thank you for having me. Yes, I do expect the hostage and prisoner release exchange to take place smoothly. The scenes you've showed a little bit of from Tel Aviv and really across Israel right now are extraordinarily moving. The entire country has been waiting for 740 days for their last hostages to be released. We expect 20 who are alive to be coming out. And it's really the first time when Israelis, since the attacks of October 7th, will really begin to exhale and believe that, as the president said, that the war really is over. That for them is the critical test that the war is over. There's still a question of the remains of some of the deceased hostages, whether they will all be returned. But this is a very, very important moment. For Palestinians, of course, receiving the prisoners that they are awaiting will also be a marker. So I think this part is going to go smoothly today. Obviously, there's a lot of work ahead to get the phase 2 elements to take place the way the president described them.
No, definitely a lot, as you mentioned, to look out for. The big question really is what's next? Do you think the truce will hold? What challenges lie ahead for a post-war Gaza?
The biggest challenge is that Hamas remains in control of the parts of Gaza that the Israeli military has now left. And so within the cities of Gaza, Hamas is trying to reestablish themselves as the strongest security force. They're putting people with guns on the streets. They're conducting retribution killings against clans and other Palestinian groups that may have opposed them during the war. It's going to probably be a bloody period internally in Gaza for this period. And that's a problem for Palestinians, of course, but it's also a problem for the goal of rebuilding Gaza and bringing in the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank and bringing in an international stabilization force. None of those very desirable outcomes are going to be easy to do, and maybe they'll be impossible to do unless Hamas is actually disarmed, its weapons taken away, its tunnels destroyed, and really many of its fighters and leaders remaining in Gaza leaving. Now, that can only come about through pressure brought upon them by the countries that have influence over them: Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. Those countries were and Egypt. Those countries were very influential in getting them to agree to this hostage release. And President Trump will be seeing many of those leaders in the summit in Egypt later today. So this is really critical that those countries step forward and keep that pressure on Hamas to do the disarmament. Otherwise, all of the other elements that we want to see happen after the war are going to be very hard to do.
Well, you mentioned about Hamas disarming, but Hamas clearly insisting it will not disarm or leave Gaza. With that in mind, what options does it have at this point?
This is really also a decision that the Palestinian people are going to have to make. Of course, Palestinians who live in Gaza, their lives have been ruined by the war that followed Hamas's decision to launch the terrible October 7th attacks. And so this is also something not only that comes from external pressure, countries like Qatar and Turkey, but internal pressure, Palestinians themselves declaring that this is not how they want to live. They want to be ruled by responsible leaders who want to be connected to the outside world, who don't want to pose a threat to Israel or subjugate those Palestinians who they rule, the way Hamas has done now for 18 years in Gaza at tremendous, tremendous cost. So there's got to be pressure internally and pressure externally. They have to meet in the middle. Of course, Israel will be defending its border and even the areas of Gaza that it still controls. But when President Trump says the war is over, it means Israel is not going to be the party that's going to go into the other parts of Gaza to disarm. It's got to come about through an internal Palestinian and an external Arab and Turkish process.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps let's turn to the peace summit, in Egypt. No representatives from Israel or Hamas will be at the peace summit. How's that going to work? How do you, forge peace without the warring parties' presence?
I think the purpose of this summit is to make sure all the other parties are prepared to play the role they need to play in order to help this phase 2 of the peace agreement that the president is trying to make a reality come about. So there are countries that can bring in international stabilization forces, Arab countries, Muslim countries, perhaps Indonesia and Turkey, perhaps some countries from Europe as well, or other Muslim countries in Central Asia might be able to bring forces supported by the United States into Gaza to serve as that stabilization force. Countries who support, who want to be able to fund the reconstruction of Gaza, particularly the Gulf countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and provide training and assistance to the Palestinian Authority as it reforms and as it gets ready to assume its responsibilities governing Gaza. So all of the countries that are going to be assembled there will have responsibilities. The United States is going to have to be the leader and coordinator of this. President Trump has said he would serve as the chair of the Board of Peace that would oversee the International Transition Authority and many of these other elements. So it's going to take a lot of very, very intense, focused, detailed, ongoing diplomacy led by the United States, but with all of these other countries making their contributions. And then those countries, as I mentioned earlier, that have particular influence and the ability to pressure Hamas to take decisions that Hamas will resist, but need to take in order to make any of this happen, have to take that responsibility as well.
Well, is there any scenario, Dr. Shapiro, for peace and stability in the Middle East that would really get the support of all parties, Israel, Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and other Arab leaders? What does this look like?
I don't think we have that agreed by everybody yet. Of course, President Trump's 20-point plan speaks about, of course, disarming Hamas, going through a reconstruction process and stabilization process, allowing a Palestinian Authority that goes through a series of very intense reforms to then come in and take its responsibilities. But then discussions ensuing between Israelis and Palestinians that include what he calls a credible pathway to achieving a Palestinian state, which is the aspirations of Palestinians to have self-determination in a state of their own. Otherwise, this has been known in the past as the two-state solution, a peaceful arrangement between a secure state of Israel and a peaceful Palestinian state living alongside it in parts of the West Bank and Gaza, whatever those borders happen to be and would have to be negotiated. But, I worked on a lot of negotiations related to efforts to achieve that two-state solution in the past. They were all unsuccessful, obviously. Some had promise and some didn't get very far. But I think whatever it looks like, it's going to take a lot longer to get to that outcome. It's going to take many years for Israelis to recover from the trauma that they've been through on October 7th and the fear, the rightful fear that they have that a Palestinian entity alongside Israel could produce that kind of attack again. It's going to take time, but it's also going to look different than some of the previous efforts. I don't think you can cut and paste the maps or the arrangements or the proposed agreements from the Oslo period or other periods of these negotiations. It's going to take time. But if that is agreed by various parties as the direction that over time, as the Palestinian Authority reforms, as Gaza stabilizes, the discussions between Israelis and Palestinians guided by the United States will take place, then perhaps that is the vision that most of the countries in the region can ultimately agree to. But I want to be cautious about that. At the moment, you talk about a two-state solution with most Israelis. including many who have supported that idea for many years, after October 7th, they're really not ready yet to have that conversation.
Well, then, based on what you've just shared with us, is Palestinian statehood really realistic?
It's not realistic tomorrow. It's not realistic in the very near future, the next year, 2 years. But as I said, over time, if the Palestinian Authority under new leadership demonstrates that it can root out corruption, that it can become a reliable and consistently effective counterterrorism partner, if Hamas is disarmed and removed from power in Gaza, and those Gazans who want to live peacefully alongside Israel take their place, supported by Arab states, supported by Turkey, supported by the international community in building up a stable and responsible form of governance in Gaza, then I think you can start to have that conversation about Palestinian statehood. I just think we can't assume we can jump immediately to that endpoint. There's a lot of steps that have to take place in order to get there, and it's going to take time. It's not something that's going to happen this year or next year.
Absolutely. We'll wait and see how this whole situation turns out to be. Mr. Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insights with us. Daniel Shapiro, Distinguished Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative.